So Simone Marshall Hayes is an assistant district attorney in Nashville, Tennessee. She was raised in Nashville and after high school ventured to Southern Adventist University, where she studied journalism and eventually returned to Nashville to attend law school at Belmont College of Law. There, she was elected president of the Black Student Association, vice president of the American Constitutional Society, and has represented the law school at various statewide functions. After law, she started her career as an assistant DA at the district's office in Nashville. Most recently, moved to Alexandria, Virginia in 2019 after she got married to Pastor Garrison Hayes. In her spare time, she enjoys writing, traveling, of course, pre-COVID, biking with her husband, volunteering with the Innocence Project, and wielding the power of Christ to advocate for better, more comprehensive representation for the members of the Black community. And so at this time, without further ado, I am introducing to some and presenting to others, Attorney Simone Hayes. What an opportunity to have you serve with us. We're so grateful.
Thank you so much, Pastor Neasley. It's so good to be back here with you all today. It is always an honor, and truly, Dr. Jones Campbell is hard to follow here. I'm gonna have to do my best, but we're gonna work it out here. We're gonna do what we can. We're gonna be talking a little bit about racism and sexism in the workplace, and I'm so excited to share this with you because most of us function in a workplace, in a workspace in some form or fashion, or we know people who do. Even if we have maybe exited the workspace formally, we're still, we have children who might enter into the workspace, or husbands that might be in the workspace, or other women in our circles that are there as well. And so I'm excited to talk about some of the issues that we face, how we can create a better community, and the things that we can do to kind of remedy some of the challenges that we face. I want to invite you now. I see that we do have the chat function going, so I actually may not need this, but I do have this poll everywhere link up. If you all can start orienting yourself there. Don't worry, it will be back up soon. But if you want to start orienting yourself there, you may. So as Pastor Guerrero mentioned, I am an assistant district attorney. I actually am back in Nashville now. I had moved to DC for 2 years, but I'm back in Nashville as an assistant DA, and I handle any variety of serious felony cases, primarily orienting towards domestic violence cases. And I have also seen in my profession and in the law, I've seen a litany of issues with racism and sexism. And so I'm very excited to talk about these today. So here are some of our goals. Our agenda for today. We're going to set out our primary goals and intentions for the conversation. We're going to talk about sexism, defining it, what it looks like in the workplace. We're going to talk about racism, defining it, what it looks like in the workplace. And then we'll briefly talk about intersectionality as well. So our goals today are that we should define the terms racism, sexism, and intersectionality, that we want to dissect and understand what they may look like in the workplace, that we can navigate those things better out after coming out of this conversation, and that we can outline our role in combating sexism and racism in the workplace. And then, of course, we want to discuss what a healthy workplace would look like and celebrate some of the progress that we've made, and also hinge on some of the differences that we can make in our workplace as well. Our intentions are always to create an open and honest conversation, to create a safe space where you can speak freely. I do have a couple of house rules. I ask that you respect the opinions of others that they express, and I ask that you speak for yourself using I statements if you want to share opinions or feelings. Also, what happens here stays here. I know that this is being recorded, but if there's something that isn't recorded, then if it's a personal story, please don't share that unless you have the express consent of the person who shared it. And of course, I want us to walk away from here boldly pursuing healthy environments for ourselves and for others. So let's talk about sexism. Let's jump right into the definition. So sexism is prejudice or discrimination based on sex. It's especially a word that's especially been oriented, I would say, kind of connotatively or colloquially to discrimination against women. The second prong of that is behaviors, conditions, or attitudes that foster stereotypes of social roles based on sex. And that is Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition. So let's talk about interpersonal sexism. Interpersonal sexism, we've already defined the main word here, but interpersonal is different because this occurs between individuals. So it could be between partners, it could be between friends, family members, coworkers, strangers. So this could happen when you're walking in the store one day. This could happen when you're talking to your boss. This could happen when you're in a conversation with your spouse or with your family members. It could be any number of those individuals, but this is an individual one-to-one, or it could be, you know, more than one person, but it's not a systemic problem. It's an interpersonal. Okay, so I would like for you to either put in the chat or go to Poll Everywhere. And I would like for you to put in some of the things, some of the challenges that you see with interpersonal sexism. What is it that it looks like to you? Just pop those in the word cloud that you will see. Just go ahead and submit your answers, and I'll kind of read some of those off. And we'll delve right into it. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Okay. I see systemic sexism is when a person believes in equality. Yes, combating that. And we're getting to that soon. So I'm really excited to cover that as well. So I'll give you all a few minutes here. Thank you, Ms. Walters, for that contribution. Very excited to delve in on that. Okay, yes. I see. Yep. Person not listening exactly because I'm female, relating to other women in the workplace, being validated by peers and people in general. Yes. And some of these are framed in the positive, and I love that because we're going to get there. Sexism, obviously, as you know, is the negative implication of sort of viewing women as being lesser, and it can technically be viewing men as lesser, but typically it is oriented towards women. And so it's actually the negative practice, kind of like racism. And I see that that was also put in the chat, and that's a very good observation as well. And we'll talk about how those converge. Yes, a woman's knowledge is not appreciated, especially if it's greater than her boss's. Oh my goodness. Yes, exactly. So let's delve right in here. Thank you for all of your responses. So we've got, I've highlighted a few here. Harassment, both sexual and non-sexual. Okay. And we'll break these down a little bit more later. Labeling qualities that are often positive as in men as negative in women, like calling women too assertive, aggressive, bossy. The requirement of women to overprove their qualifications. We all know somebody, okay, a woman who is so incredibly qualified for her job, no questions asked. Dare I mention Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was so qualified for her position, and yet people were looking at her like, oh, can you tell us your LSAT score? Which I'm sure was actually superb, but they're looking at these things that really are not indicative of her ability to do the job or her experience. The requirement of women to overprove their qualifications in comparison to their male counterparts, and inequitable judgment of the work performance based on sex. So harassment can be both sexual and non-sexual. So sexual harassment can obviously look like physical advances or sexual comments. This is actually something that I find that a lot of women experience. Unfortunately, in my lived experience as an attorney, as an assistant district attorney, my privilege is that I encounter a lot of individuals on a daily basis, which is always, for me as an extrovert, is always a fun time. However, it does not come without its fair share of commentary, whether that's on my dress, the way that I dress, which is always in a suit, but, oh, your husband is so lucky, comments like that. Or, inappropriate touching of the shoulder that I have to quickly kind of establish, get away from that and move away and say, hey, I don't appreciate that. You did that. So those are the types of sexual harassment advances that you can experience in a workplace. But there are also non-sexual harassment complaints as well. And those are defined as from the EEOC as comments about one's sex, including one's sexual orientation, gender, identity, or pregnancy. The person who is harassing can be any sex. The person who is being harassed can be any sex, technically, legally. And the harasser can be any number of these individuals: the victim's supervisor, the supervisor in another area of the company, a coworker, a subordinate, or someone who is not even an employee of the employer, such as a client or customer who is in that space. So here's a quote for us to kind of orient ourselves from the EEOC. Although the law does not prohibit minor teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that are not frequent or serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, such as the person being fired or demoted. That's important because we are going to get into how you combat racism and your rights a little bit later. So other examples of interpersonal sexism might be someone accusing you of not being or acting ladylike, making a joke based on someone's sexist beliefs, justifying sexism by saying boys will be boys. Oh my goodness, how many times have we heard that? Blatantly ignoring, minimizing, or invalidating your thoughts, ideas, and feelings just because you're a woman. So let's talk about systemic sexism. Systemic sexism is much more big and broad. So let's put in the chat, what are some of the systemic sexism, examples of systemic sexism that you see in the workplace? What can that look like? Yes. Okay. And that's also, my dentist is Dr. first name while her husband is Dr. last name. That's a habit that we have in our society, is not referring to women and men in the same way, with the same level of respect. Oh my goodness, we appreciate women, but not in the ministry. Oh my goodness, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? Shout out to every woman here who is in ministry. We see you, we appreciate you. We thank you, but it is absolutely true that we have had a system in Adventism that has not honored and uplifted women in ministry, and has tried to limit women in ministry, unfortunately. Men are promoted, women are secretaries. Yep, and we will get to some of that later as well. That's exactly right. Promotions are a huge way that we see discrimination pan out. These responses are great. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to what that looks like here. So we're going to highlight a couple here. The pay gap. We'll get into the numbers a little bit later, but the pay gap is a big issue for women. We are not paid the same as men, specifically white men. Poor representation of women in leadership roles, another thing that we'll delve into a little bit later. inequitable policies for men and women, including maternity and paternity leave. And we'll get into why that's significant later as well and how that pans out. Oh, yes, requiring ordination to hold office, but not denying ordination. That's exactly right, Ms. Walters. So systemic racism, lack of women in the C-suite. This is a very, very common. So C-suite includes CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and CIOs. So that's Chief Executive Officer, Finance, Operations, and Information Officers. White men, according to the study of in 2022, white men have accepted and are currently in position for about 61% of those C-suite positions. White men alone, okay? White women are the next most prolific demographic in C-suite positions at 21%. That is still, even though they're second most prolific, that's still a 21-point difference. A 40-point difference from white men. And then men of color, by the way, note how broad this is, okay? This isn't even, we're not looking at Black men, we're not looking at Asian men, we're not looking at Hispanic or Latino men. We are just looking at men of color. They, in total, are represented at 13%, which is a 48-point difference from white men. And women of color are a measly 5% of C-suite positions across our nation. That is a 56-point difference from white men. Obviously, we have a problem there, huge problem there. And you can see the graphic. It outlines, you're holding on to that color barely at the bottom of this chart here. That's how significant this is. And this is important because individuals who are in the C-suite are making the decisions for the corporation. Are we allowing for our corporations to make decisions that are fully informed by communities? We know the answer is no, just judging by some of the decisions that corporations make. But this is important for us as we are evaluating our decisions and our moves in our company, that we need to be in the room, that there needs to be more space for us to be able to navigate this. Yes, barely needs, exactly, Pastor Guerrero, barely, they're just hanging in there. Oh my goodness. So on to our next point, pregnancy discrimination and its impact. So this is a study that was done at Baylor University. They published it in the Journal of Applied Psychology. And I know that we'll have a couple presenters later that will talk more about this, but they surveyed 252 pregnant employees, and they measured their perceived pregnancy discrimination, perceived stress, demographics, and postpartum depressive symptoms. The results were that pregnancy discrimination had a negative impact on both the mother and the baby. Pregnancy discrimination was linked to increased postpartum depressive symptoms for mothers and lower birth rates, lower gestational ages, and increased number of doctor visits for babies. This is a quote about the woman's rights, I guess, and the level of complaints that have been taking place through the EEOC. If a woman is temporarily unable to perform her job due to a medical condition related to pregnancy or childbirth, the employer or other covered entity must treat her in the same way as it treats any other temporarily disabled employee. Yet, statistics show that in the last 10 years, more than 50,000 pregnancy discrimination claims were filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the EEOC, and Fair Employment Practices agencies in the United States. So we still have a huge issue. And what that issue looks like is oftentimes that when women accept jobs, there is this pressure for them to not have kids, for them to go ahead and get kids out of the way so that they can become a real part of the company. There is this pressure for women to perform even while they're on maternity leave. Especially in high performance oriented professions like law, like medicine, like finance. There is this expectation that they will just keep plowing through that no matter what is going on. But we don't have the same idea for people who break their leg or people who fall off of a ladder and have a neck injury. We don't have that expectation of them. We let them heal. We let them go through their season. We let them grow into the healed version of themselves that they need to be in order to come back to work. Yet here we are, and 50,000 reports of discrimination claims were filed within the last 10 years. That's a lot. And those are just the ones filed. We'll get to this a little later, but there's a hesitation to even file those reports and those claims. So you know it must have been bad. So systemic sexism. Our next point is maternity and paternity leave. Simply put, under Title VII, it is illegal for fathers and mothers to receive a different amount of paid maternity leave. However, we still find that women are shamed for taking their leave, and they're devalued in terms of team morale and also in terms of assignments that they receive, and that men are hesitant to take their full leave out of fear as being viewed as less productive. So there's still this stigma around it. So how do we remedy sexism in the workplace? You have to know your rights. You have to advocate for other women when you get the chance. You have to advocate for yourself, and you have to hold your workplace accountable for their actions and choices. And I know that you will cover this a lot more later today after lunch, but you also have to recruit allies and hold them closely. This is a quote from Myra Strober. She is a professor and researcher at Stanford University. And she said, the American way, if you will, is to reward people who are valuable by paying them more. What's not fair is rewarding them because you think they're going to be more valuable before the game even starts. So, for example, saying a man, oh, he's not going to have any kids, and so we're going to pay him more from the beginning because we think he's going to be a longer term investment in our company. She's saying that's not fair. She's saying managers should take people in at entry level positions and try to groom them all to see who turns out to be the best fit. She also suggests that companies ought to examine salary disparities, offer paid parental leave and subsidize or offer childcare. They should encourage workplace flexibility, and that would help them to diversify and equalize the workspace. Okay, so first things first, let's go over some of our rights here, okay? This is just a quick overview. There are complexities to this, but if you have a question about discrimination, feel free to reach out to your EEOC. They will be able to help you to navigate the issue that you're having on your job. And so I definitely recommend that you would do that. So the Equal Pay Act requires that men and women in the same workplace be given equal pay for work. All forms of pay are covered by this, okay? So that includes salary, overtime pay, bonuses, stock options, profit sharing and bonus plans, life insurance, cleaning or gasoline allowances, vacation and holiday pay, hotel accommodations, reimbursement for travel expenses, and benefits. If there's inequality, and I love this, if there's inequality between men and women, the employer may not choose the lesser of the two. So the woman who gets $59,000 and the man who gets $65,000, they may not put the man down to the woman's standard and say, okay, well, we're going to have you pay we're going to pay $59,000 to both of them. No, they have to raise the woman's pay to be equal to the man's pay. The time limit for filing an EPA charge with the EEOC is 2 years. And those are both for going to court with this matter and for the EEOC. Title VII, like we mentioned earlier, also makes it illegal to discriminate based on sex in pay and benefits. Therefore, you may actually have both claims if you have an issue on your job. And one thing that I will also mention here, and especially as Adventists, this is important to us. Title VII and the ADA prohibit compensation discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or disability. And so there are more specific requirements, like there's a minimum amount of employees that the Title VII covers, like I think it's like 15 and 20 respectively. But in order for them to take action on your behalf, however, if you qualify, if your employer qualifies with their number, if they are discriminating against you because you are taking a Sabbath, that is illegal. And we know that, but I'm giving you the specific language just in case you need it. It's a Title VII violation. So Know your rights with pregnancy policies. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act forbids discrimination on the basis of pregnancy when it comes to any aspect of employment. This could be hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, fringe benefits such as leave and health insurance, and any other term or condition of employment. Okay, so remedying sexism in the C-suite roles, like we talked about earlier. You can create a level playing field by taking some of these steps, enabling flexible working hours for parents of both genders. I think this is really important because when we talk about sexism, we often talk about how women are disenfranchised by sexism. But actually, nobody benefits from sexism. Men do not benefit by not being present with their children and being present in their family's life. Men do not benefit by overworking and being overly available to their workplaces. Women do not benefit by having to be both places excessively so, right? Like if their partner is working more than a full-time job because he feels like I just have to kind of be this hamster in the wheel. And then she's also working her full-time job and taking care of her children. This is not a healthy environment for anyone. And so flexible working hours for parents of both genders is actually really, really important to us finding sort of this equity space. Making salary ranges for various positions more flexible. That is transparency is how we start to gain some of this data and see that problems exist. And so that's huge. It also helps people to see what they're worth. So that when they're looking at salary ranges, it helps them to orient to, hey, I meet every single qualification that they're looking for. I'm deserving of this job and I'm deserving of this pay. Ensure clear career paths to development for all associates, encourage women to apply to positions, improve childcare and support, advertise all job postings, and offer equivalent maternity and paternal leaves. So we're going to move on to racism now. Racism is a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. It's also behavioral attitudes that reflect and foster this belief, so racial discrimination or prejudice. The second definition is a systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and political advantage of another. And 2B is a political or social system founded on racism and designed to execute its principles. So there is definitely a overt racism and subtle racism. Overt racism, derogatory names, physically aggressive actions, violent behaviors, threats of violence, explicit declarations of superior or inferiority based on skin color alone. But there's also subtle racism, which is most common today, right? Most people have learned, not all, but most people have learned that you cannot call someone the N-word. Most people have learned that you cannot punch someone in the face and say, go back to insert country that you think that they're from. Most people have learned that those things are unacceptable. Most people have learned that you cannot try to burn someone's house down just because you want them to move out of the neighborhood because they're the only person of color in the neighborhood. But subtle racism is forever blooming and growing, and it's forever present in our communities. And that looks like microaggressions, that looks like curation of community that excludes minoritized individuals, and it looks like tokenization. So let's talk about interpersonal racism a little bit. Microaggressions are defined as commonplace verbal and behavioral indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights or insults. I want your feedback. What are some microaggressions that you have experienced or that you have seen? And you can go ahead and put those in the chat if you'd like. Oh my goodness. You do not represent the face of the company. Wow. You do not represent the face of the company. As if to say that the company that you work for, that you contribute to, somehow you, because of the way your appearance, because of your skin color, because of possibly your sex, they don't view you as being representative of the work that you do, even though you do it every day. They act differently from the rest of us. That's right. Telling someone that they act differently from the accepted group. You don't speak like a Black person. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Absolutely. As if all Black people speak the same way. And also, it really centers this idea that all white people speak the same way as well, which we all know is not true. We all have our unique intonations and ways of speaking. I'm gonna let a couple more come through. You have an accent. Where are you from? Oh, that's on our chart coming up. Spoiler alert. People love to alienate individuals based on an accent that they think that they're hearing. It's as if to say, you're not from here, right? Like you can't be from here. You're confused. Let's stick to the ABCs. Oh my goodness. That is so dismissive. That is so dismissive and disrespectful. Okay. So let's go to some examples really quick and their categories. Where are you really from? We just saw an example of this sort of from Miss LaFontaine. So where are you really from? You're so articulate. A white person clutching their purse when they walk by a person of color, a store clerk following a person of color around the store. Person of color mistakenly taken for a service worker when they're not. I'm not a racist. I have Black friends. Okay, so where are you really from? That's the alien in your own land sort of feeling, right? They kind of make you feel like you don't belong here, even though you clearly do. You're paying taxes here, you're working here, you've lived here for however many years, 30 years sometimes. So you are so articulate. Ascription of intelligence. Again, this goes back to what we just said, that is not a uniquely white thing to speak in a certain way, and it's not a uniquely Black thing to speak in a certain way either. Criminality is both of these next two options. Clutching your purse when somebody walks by. It implies that, oh, you might try to steal this from me. You might try to take this from me. A store clerk following a person of color around the store. Criminality again. That we are not a person of color being mistaken for a service worker when we're not a service worker. That we are not worthy of being customers and being served in the institutions that we go into. I'm not a racist. I have Black friends. Denial of individual racist culpability. That you can have Black friends and still not know everything. Yes, Dr. Hines, speaking slowly and loudly as if you cannot understand. Like I can understand you. I hear you. I may not agree with you, right? Like sometimes there's that tension, but it has nothing to do with my lack of understanding. A lot of times, that's kind of the way that we are spoken to. So these are great examples. Systemic racism. Some of the most common examples of systemic racism: the pay gap, the lack of diversity in senior positions, and less mobilization of people of color into positions of authority. So how do we remedy these things? Remedying interpersonal racism, I think it looks like continuing to have a conversation like the one we're having today. Speaking up if you see racist actions in your workplace and not just letting them slide, not just letting them go, right? There's sometimes people will say, especially microaggressions, because I say microaggressions / macroaggressions because they really do dictate the culture of a workplace. But sometimes we'll let things slide that we really shouldn't. And maybe that means that we need to have a lunch session or a breakout session with that person, stop by their office and have a conversation with them, just being open and honest, especially because a lot of times we've made ourselves available in creating community with these people. They oftentimes trust us to speak to these things. And so we have that responsibility to our own community to combat interpersonal racism by speaking up when we see it happen. Encourage education, reading, podcasts, and so many other things as well. Watching shows that will educate, watching movies that will educate, going to events and places and spaces where we may not naturally feel like we belong. But encouraging that cultural education is so important. Trainings on implicit bias are helpful. They're not everything. We've seen that they are helpful for people to start to think, but there's a critical thinking aspect that has to follow it. And that's a lot of times where that reading kind of component comes in. Protections, it's important that we have a safe system and policy in place at each workplace where individuals can vocalize complaints without facing retaliation. Exactly. So without facing retaliation, that's important because I do also want you to know, we don't cover it in this presentation, but retaliation is also illegal, and you can also go to the EEOC, but that is oftentimes the fear, is that you will lose your job. You will have, you will be demoted, that you will not be considered for future promotions, and other things that sometimes are not as tangible as a typical EEOC complaint, right? If somebody tells you, I'm not promoting you because you're a Black woman, we all understand that. But if you say something that somebody does not like, and then they just happen to choose this person who is sort of qualified the way that you are, but maybe just a little bit less qualified, but generally in the same ballpark, but they just happen to choose this other person now, and they choose everyone else but you moving forward, it's a little bit hard to substantiate, right? And so that fear of retaliation is always there, which is why it is so important for us to have systems that allow for employees to report these things safely. That is an extremely important part of this. So remedying systemic racism, obviously learning our history in schools is incredibly important. Having a process by which individuals can report issues safely, again, is extremely important. Transparency in hiring. Pay transparency, especially, and that goes down a little bit further to compensation studies. And dare I say, as a lawyer, more lawsuits where inequities exist, not equities, but where inequities exist. That sometimes you have to sue people into compliance. And I am a litigator. That is what I do every day, not sue people, but I am a prosecutor. But I will say that litigation makes people think twice. It's costly. Oftentimes to the defendant. It can be costly to the individual pursuing lawsuits as well, but there are agencies that can help with that. And I encourage people, when you see an inequity that is really serious on your workplace, I encourage you to report it. So intersectionality is the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combined, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. So, for example, and we'll kind of move on to our next slide, you may be any number of these descriptors. You might be an immigrant, you might be disabled, you might be Black, you might be Latino, you might be Hispanic, you might be Asian, woman, male, member of the LGBT community, Christian, Muslim. You might be any of these things and so many more. This is not even tip of the iceberg, right? Classism is very real. Low income family, middle class family, right? So there's so many different classifiers for us, and how these things all converge to create a lived experience that can sometimes be very challenging. I have a quote here from Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the mother of intersectionality, and she is incredible. She is absolutely incredible. I totally recommend that you read her documents and her books on intersectionality and critical race theory. She says, now you might ask, this was during her TED Talk. She said, now you might ask, an issue that affects Black people and an issue that affects women, wouldn't that necessarily include Black people who are women and women who are Black people? But in fact, this is not how it works out. This way of thinking encourages a trickle-down approach that lets many people fall through the cracks. And what she means here is that we've seen time and time again in litigation that when Black women specifically, is who she centers in her work, when Black women have brought lawsuits and they've said, I would like to sue my company in a class action lawsuit people have looked at them and said, okay, you can sue on behalf of Black women. However, you're going to struggle with your class action status because you don't really represent Black men and you don't really represent white women either. And so that limits their ability to be effective in their space because there's this assumption that essentially they're this island all on their own. And there's not that overlap between their lived experience. And then other courts have said in the past, and they're, we're getting a little bit better these days as we talk about it, name it, and expose it. But in a 1970 case, Black women brought to the courts their issue, and they totally dismissed the fact that they could have two claims. They said, no, you got to choose. You've got to pick a struggle here, right? You're a Black woman and you're Black and you're a woman. However, those two things don't converge in the way that you think that they do to create a specific type of discrimination. You have to pick. And that type of minimization and dismissal of the unique struggles of Black women have not just been found in litigation. It's been found culturally, where oftentimes the struggles that we have as women are not always felt and understood and known by our Black male counterparts. And oftentimes our struggles as Black women are not always known by our female white counterparts. And we know that historically, that both movements have honestly kind of pushed Black women to the side. Feminism, although it is rooted and grounded in the equality of women, oftentimes pushed out or excluded Black women from that conversation. And Black men, in their pursuit of civil rights, we had it kind of like a double down, right? Black men got their right to vote because they were men, and then white women got their right to vote, and then Black women had to wait for civil rights to be able to use it all, right? So it's kind of one of those things where we've been on this we're behind the curve in a lot of different ways because we experience discrimination twice, if we're lucky, twice over. Some of us, I'm an immigrant to this country. My family's from the Caribbean. And as an immigrant, we experience it 3 times over. Don't add anything else on. Right? Most of us are probably Adventists on this call, which knows that we have a different way of celebrating Sabbath every week, which adds a totally new layer, right? So the intersectionality component is so important. It's important for us to be mindful of this because of the effects that it has on us. So how can we build a healthy workplace? Let's talk about some of the positive things that we can do here. We can curate a culture of inclusion. We can create equitable healthcare and family leave for all sexes, flexible working conditions where it's feasible, equal opportunities for growth and success regardless of sex or race. We can give affirmation to others for their lived experiences, recognizing that we've not experienced it all, and that's okay. That's all right. But I am not a female pastor, and so I'm going to defer to Pastor Guerrero in terms of her experience. And I'm going to honor her as a person who has experienced that. She may not have been an assistant district attorney, and so she will honor me in my experience in that way. And it's important that we have this space and this willingness to affirm instead of defend, and to affirm instead of invalidate, and affirm instead of dismiss. That creates a culture that can have difficult conversations. And we are all in some space that needs that, whether it's our family, whether it is our workplace, whether it is our church. We all need to curate cultures that are inclusive. We also need to make a commitment to encourage open and honest conversations. We need to create safe spaces, and we also need to eliminate the Black tax. Now, we didn't talk about this in depth, but I'm just going to mention this here. The Black tax is that oftentimes in spaces where they're not all, and this goes back to tokenization as well, where there are not a lot of Black people or brown people or women, we get put in the steering position, right? Behind the steering wheel to make everything happen. And so here we are juggling our 9 to 5, oftentimes 8 to 6, right? We're juggling that. And we're also now juggling every diversity effort in our purview. So I'm advocating on behalf of immigrants. I'm advocating on behalf of women. I'm advocating on behalf of Black people. And so what time that's a tax on me, right? Because now I'm not just doing my job, I'm doing the work that a professional diversity, equity, and inclusion and community officer should be doing. That's on me now. And I'm not getting paid for that. It's just good vibes. It's just, hey, we hope that we're able to make life better for you, Simone. And so that's why we're doing this, right? And so there's a certain tax that gets put on us emotionally, mentally, physically. Our time is monopolized and we're not being compensated for it. And so we have to encourage our corporations, our workspaces, our communities to do better with curating this experience in a way that allows for people to have balance and allows them to be at the table, but does not require them to be at the table in order for this work to be done. So let's talk about if you're in management, just a few tips for anybody in here. And I'm sure that there are some here who are in management. What can you do to combat racism and sexism? Be a safe, non-judgmental person for employees to go to. Encourage DEI work, which I have under there, the full-time employee. That's important. Implicit bias training is important. Make DEI resources available for employees, and that's on a daily basis. That's not just a once a year implicit bias training. No, let's talk about having resources that are readily accessible, whether that's a course that they can, like little short snippets that they can continually watch, whatever it is that's paid for in production by the company, so that people can pull it up on an app for their company, whatever it is. We need to make that accessible. We need to make our standards accessible to people. We need to encourage flexibility where we can. We need to curate growth opportunities for all genders and races to have access to the same resources. I'm almost done here, but I am going to stay here just a little while longer just to talk about this point. This is important because a lot of times our spaces, especially professional spaces, I noticed this when I was in law school, that I thought I had a great relationship with my professors. I thought they were amazing, and they were. However, and I did have a great relationship with them. However, I quickly realized that I was not necessarily being invited to their houses, right? For their fellowship, for their birthday, for things like that. And I was not being included because I may not have looked like or acted like or had shared family friends of, right? Or whatever it is, had the legacy of some of my classmates. And I quickly became aware that even though I felt like I had wonderful, blossoming, blooming community, and I was doing the most I could with every relationship that I had there, that I still was put at a disadvantage because I did not automatically belong to those communities that were given increased access to opportunity. Increased access to how to write academic articles, increased access to how to shadow another attorney, increased access to internship opportunities, increased access to hobnob with future employers. We have to do a good job of curating those opportunities for everyone in the workplace. Obviously, it's important for us to set standards and to track progress. That's really important. It's important for us to have a zero tolerance policy for explicitly racist comments and explicitly sexist comments. It is important that we have a safe space. I cannot say that enough more times than I already have. And for everyone, I think the unique things here, aside from having a safe space, aside from affirmation, is to alert those in power to racism and sexism in your workplace, and to hold your leaders accountable to tracking their goals and to achieving that goal that they had set out. You don't get invited to the informal lunches and dinners. That was just for the white men. Oh my goodness. Can we talk about the golf trips that I've seen some of my colleagues take? And where am I? I didn't even know it was happening, but they're going out and they're playing golf on a Friday afternoon. And where's my opportunity to do that, right? And it's because there's an assumption, first of all, there's an assumption that I don't play golf. They don't know whether I do or not. There's an assumption that I don't. And there's also this idea that, that they think alike, that they have community with one another. And so therefore, they are the right fit for that opportunity. They've carefully selected who they ask and don't ask, right? And so these are things that we have to tackle. I hope that this was helpful. That is all that I have for you today. I do have a couple more resource slides that I will briefly pop up just to give credit where it is due. And this is not even all of them. But yeah, that's it.
Wow. Just wow. So helpful. That's the words coming through. So helpful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Attorney Simone. I always appreciate your work. I always appreciate when you come to the table and how to hold the church to let me read that properly. How to hold the church in the denomination to an anti space is a question that's come for you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think so. We do have unique challenges as a church institution because there's a lot of in terms of establishing equity, because it really has to come from a policy perspective, because the law is not going to get involved in the way that a church is run. They give that autonomy to churches. And so it actually becomes where we truly do have to do the work. There is not necessarily always a lawsuit. And I say always, and I'm always, as a lawyer, I'm always going to leave room for there to be an issue that could come up where we could litigate. However, they are extremely rare. Oftentimes, the government will leave up to us as Adventists the way that we deal with our clergy, the way that we interact with our constituents. And it does make litigation effective litigation very challenging. However, it's important that we get into the room of policymaking, because maybe we cannot at this time effectuate a law, but you can create a policy and a culture that is healthy. And I've seen multiple areas, regions is that's exactly right. Our belief 13 is rumination of anti-discrimination. And so, we have to do a good job of creating policy and getting into the room and creating allies, which you guys will talk about later.
Yes, thank you so much for this information. I know you have to run. I also remember that Priscilla had asked me a question a week or so ago. She shared with me an experience they had, and it's about trying to figure out how to address the venom that women receive, sort of whether if they're on a platform, if they're preaching or whatever. Is there anything that can be done from sort of a legal perspective to a cease and desist order or something like that on someone who just continues to spew on women as far as ordination or women in ministry?
Yeah, so that's definitely going to depend on your local laws. But restraining orders are great for individuals who are harassing you at your place of work. And so you can get one of those. I've seen men get them, pastors get them when people have come to their churches and they have threatened them. I've seen male pastors get security put in place when their lives have been threatened and their livelihood has been threatened. And so we have to start advocating for those same things and taking those same actions when we are harassed in the pulpit, and when we are constantly, our mission is being, we're being distracted, right, by these individuals who are harassing us. And so that's probably the term that you could probably seek that under is harassment, but it's going to depend on your local laws, what exactly that means, and whether or not the incident that you're talking about and referencing will fit in that description so that you can get the restraining order, if that makes sense. So check out your local laws for sure. Yes. Oh my goodness, Dr. Hines, absolutely. Abuse people. We in the C-suite must remember how we were treated and refrain from refrain from perceived rewards of executing racism. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to view our position as being one that we can help others with and one that we can elevate others with. We have to remember what it was like to be before were in the C-suite, before we were in positions of authority. How did we get here? What was our journey like, and how can we make it easier and more meaningful and more healthier for someone else?
Well, thank you so much, Attorney Simone. I appreciate you, your brain, your knowledge, the information, how you pull everything together. Thank you so much. I know that the Association of Adventist Women will probably want to have some more conversation with you, because they are really looking in how to start having this question, this discussion and of equity and all of that. And I'm sure they can definitely use some of your expertise in the law and also in this topic. So thank you very much for your time. I know you must run, so may God continue to bless you and the good pastor. Praying that all will continue to be well. I love that smile on your face. I miss it. I am glad to see it. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.